This is the Startup Reading Podcast, created by a group of founders, funders, and entrepreneurs who believe you can have a thriving startup ecosystem in any city in the world. So they created one in theirs, Redding, California. On episode 2, we're going to take time to talk to Joshua David Miller, CEO of Mindbox Studios. He's an integral part of the Startup Reading ecosystem, member of the steering committee that's helping to guide and shape the future of our ecosystem. And I'm really excited to introduce him to you. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
Better than average. Did you know that 85% of all people consider themselves above average?
I did know that, and it never ceases to amaze me.
I think that's one of the reasons why people struggle with our subject for the day, because not only are we often thinking we're above average, we often think we're actually superior. And then when we get to the process of how to have a good idea, if you start with that framework, you're screwed.
That's undoubtedly true, which is actually one of my favorite things about the ideation process, some of the games we use to conquer that, which I'm sure we'll get to later.
We will. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why we're talking to you.
So I'm Josh David Miller. I'm known in the Redding community also as JDM for reasons that are probably self-explanatory, but also because there is heavy market saturation of Joshes around here, and I've just chosen this as being easier for myself. JDM, that's right. But you can call me Josh too. That's fine. By day,
Josh 2 as opposed to Josh 1 or Josh 3?
Yeah, and I heard my business partner Joshua Johnson has a new nickname. It's J Money. So I don't have a cool nickname like that. I'm just stuck with JDM, but I'm just gonna roll with it.
So you have a business partner.
I do,
kind of
yeah.
Business are you in?
So by day, I'm the CEO of Mindbox Studios, which is a software development company. We develop web apps and mobile apps for startups and corporate entrepreneurs. You can, but that's not really why I'm here today. I'm here today for my work in the Startup Reading ecosystem, and we're putting on a fantastic event on June 21st. It's our first pub talk, our first in a series of pub talks that a lot of the community leaders have been really excited about for a long time, and I, for one, am thrilled that we're finally getting these off the ground.
That's awesome. So June 21st, it's at a pub, I take it?
It is indeed. You deduced that well. It is at Maxwell's at 5:30 p.m. It'll probably run until around 8 o'clock. And the typical format for that kind of pub talk is to get together and socialize. It's at a pub, so I assume the attendees shall be free to imbibe and converse and network and meet founders, funders, startup enthusiasts and creatives. We'll have a small educational piece. The point isn't to have a long lecture, but we'll have a small educational component, always followed by an experiential component, so we can try to apply that knowledge and learn together and grow our community. And then we'll hear a pitch from a local startup who's a little further along in the process than probably most of us are. And at this first one, we're hearing from Pocket Points, which is a Chico-based startup that's actually raising money. So we're going to get to hear their pitch and maybe ask them a couple of questions as well.
That's awesome. I've actually had the opportunity to hear that pitch, and it's fabulous. They're doing a really, really cool thing. They're post-revenue. I don't know if they're making money yet or not. As any decent startup, probably not, right? But they're doing a great thing. It would be well worth everybody's time just to come out and hear that pitch. They're doing a great job. So what's the purpose of pub talks? Why are you excited about them?
Well, I'm excited about them for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost reason is that one of the great things, one of the amazing things really about Redding, and just as a quick sidebar, when you talk about startup Redding, if you're not really in that ecosystem already, the first thing you hear is Redding as a startup community, and they assume, oh, you're talking about a crafts market or something of that, and we're definitely not. We are talking about startups as you probably conceive of them, though the definition is probably slightly broader than that. But we do have a startup ecosystem here. One of the amazing things about it is that we have great ideas, or what we call top of funnel. So at our startup weekend event, which we're sure to hear more about in the coming months as we head toward our fifth in Reading. We had our pitches on Friday night. These are brand new ideas, 60-second pitches, and they've gotten consistently better every single year. So we have this great, amazing set of ideas, and we have an angel investment group in town, as well as a bunch of investors that aren't part of the angel group. So there's capital and there's ideas, and we're looking to really pull people along that pipeline, or I guess not pull, push would probably be a slightly better term, as they have to do most of that work themselves.
Right.
But to help us just as a community up our game. And this is a great way to do that, just by providing a little bit of information that somebody can take with and run with that as they work toward their idea. Another reason that I'm really excited about it is that it's a great idea to bring everybody together. We have a lot of events in the history of Startup Reading and in the broader ecosystem that are designed to do that. A former one was called a Beer and Bites. It was put on by the Shasta EDC, and we've partnered with the Shasta EDC to kind of have Pub Talks as the natural successor to Beer and Bites. So we're going to get a lot of great people together in a room, experience that energy and creativity that comes just from doing that.
Sweet. These things, there's an educational piece, so they have themes to them, right? And what's the theme of the first one?
The theme of the first one is ideation.
And what the heck is that?
Well, I think it's probably fitting that our first pub talk is the first thing that any founder has to do, right? Is come up with an idea. And it also is the thing that people take for granted, right? It's like, oh, I'm doing a startup because I have an idea. And that's often not true at all. Entrepreneurs are born to a degree, born at least wanting to be an entrepreneur. They're certainly not born with the skills, but they're born wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to live that lifestyle. And so oftentimes it's searching for an idea, and ideation is that process. It's a really creative process by which we develop solutions to existing problems.
This is one of the things that I find is one of the main barriers to entry, and it's a mindset barrier where people that I'll talk to will often say, man, I really see myself as an entrepreneur, but, right, and then here it comes, but I don't have any good ideas, or I've always been waiting for a good idea.
Well, there are no good ideas.
There's no good ideas. Or they want an original idea, and those don't exist, right? That's over.
That's the problem, is setting the bar way too high. And so ideation is just this whole series of techniques and games and mind tricks that we can use, not only to put ourselves in the mindset of coming up with great solutions to problems, but also creating a great number of them that we can explore and potentially run with as a business.
Would you say, I hear you talking about problems or finding solutions to problems. And I know that it's very, very hard to have a good idea, right? That's just, in fact, probably even the wrong thing to be thinking about. But is it necessary to have an understanding of the problem early stage? In the process of ideation, do you have to understand a problem?
Well, I guess it depends on what the target is. If our target is to come up with a business, then all businesses are solving problems. And so you can certainly ideate around problem solving. If there's a particular domain expertise, for example, that you have, if there's something about which you're passionate, there's definitely a problem there that you're probably aware of, that you just need to surface a little bit and explore and see if other people have that problem. But finding a problem is really probably the easiest part of the whole thing. We encounter problems every single day. We just maybe don't take note of them all the time. It's finding the solutions to problems that are hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So why is it hard to find solutions?
Well, if it was easy, anybody would do it, I guess, would be the really lame answer for something like that.
Yeah, fair enough.
The reason is that more often than not, the solutions we come up with are not good. We think that they're good right away, and we say, oh, wouldn't it be great if? And we have this bias that that would be great for me. And we make this assumption that what is true for me is true for everybody. And that's usually not true. We would think, oh, well, that's true most of it. No, it's usually not true. In fact, one of the phrases that we often shout at people is, you are not your customer. And what that means is that when you think about a problem, you have to go out and validate with customers that there are actually people out there who are experiencing this very same problem.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing to have to shout at people. You are not your customer. I think I really want people to hear that again and again and again, right? If you're listening to this podcast and that's the only thing you take away, you are not your customer.
Yes.
And what are the implications of that? What does that mean to you?
Well, there are varied implications to that, but I think I briefly touched on the biggest one, which is validation. Is that Steve Blank, which I imagine most people listening to the show right now are at least familiar with your name. If not, Google Steve Blank, because you're going to find a treasure trove of amazing information. But Steve Blank, kind of the father of this kind of startup movement, used to say that there are no facts inside the building, so get out of the building. And he meant that actually in a very literal way, even though it sounds like a kind of figurative thing, is that when you're sitting around inside of your office or inside of your home and you're talking through this problem or this solution or this product or this thing, you have this massive series of assumptions that you're making. Everything from people have this problem to people experience it the same way to the things that they experience about that problem are in the same priority, an order of importance as they are for you, to the solution being adequately prioritized, to the monetization model, to how you're going to reach them, to all of that. Every single thing you make is just this assumption, because startups are not like ordinary businesses. You don't know everything about your customer up front. We know who buys automobiles. So even if we're coming out with a new kind of car, even think of Tesla, something that's changing the nature of how we think about those kinds of cars, even something like that, we know who the customer is. We maybe just be segmenting it slightly. When you're doing a startup, when you're creating something new, you have no idea. All you have are these series of assumptions. And the first thing you have to do is get out of the building and say, are these assumptions right? And usually they're not.
And usually they're not. That's what's so shocking. All right, cool. So walk us through some ideation techniques. How does one sit down and start this process?
Well, actually very, very easily. The first thing that I think is fun to do if you're doing ideation in a group, which is absolutely recommended, is way better with a group of people to ideate than it is to ideate solo. You can do it, but there's an energy and a power and diversity that comes from talking to things out loud with people more than just the voices in your head. And so when you're in that process, one of the first things I like to do is an exercise where you come up with the worst possible idea. Where you take a problem and maybe you have an idea of a customer and you try to come up with literally the worst possible solution to that problem. And that does a couple of things. The first things that it does is that it relieves pressure. Like, it's a psychological tool that later on, when you're actually doing ideation for real, it's freeing to know that whatever idea I shoot out right now or your colleague shoots out right then is not going to be the worst idea that was said today.
Plus, I always feel a little jammed up with really, really stupid ideas that I'm maybe even a little embarrassed of. And I feel like I've got to get them out so I can start thinking again. Right?
Right.
Otherwise, I'm just trying not to say the stupid thing.
Exactly. And the flip side of there being no good ideas is that some bad ideas have a seed of something interesting in them. So even getting those out there can just be interesting in and of itself. It's also great to just say well, is there a worse idea? It's just a different way of framing the problem.
Cool. Then where do you go?
Then there's a series of techniques that you can use based on why you're ideating that you can use to do it. So one that we're going to be playing with a little bit at the pub talk on June 21st is what we call inverting or challenging assumptions. And to keep things a little fresh, I won't go into very much detail on that one, but the basic premise of it is that you take everything that you think you know about an existing field or about existing businesses that are serving that customer, or to put another way, existing solutions to that problem, right? There's almost always some existing solution to the problem. The reason you're trying to start a business to solve that problem is because you don't think the existing solutions are very good, not because there aren't any others, right? So you list all of the assumptions, just as many as you can come up with, and then you go one by one and you just invert them. You just turn them right around on themselves. And then,
what's a little example of that?
Let's say you had a cleaning service or something. It can be something really, really ridiculous. And cleaning services charge by the kind of services that they offer, say floor cleaning based on square footage, right? That's how we get it done at the Mindbox office. And so they offer that suite of services and do that. So I just listed 3 assumptions in there, right? That they have this, that A, they have a suite of services, and B, that they're charging by some type of size of space, right? And that they come to you. Those are 3 different things that you could do. So the first one is that instead of having an array of services, they don't have an array of services. Does that mean, and so what could come from that? Is that they have one service? Is there one thing that they focus on and do really well? An example of that might be a window washing service. Those also often stand alone. And so you just start inverting those. And once you create this big list of inverted things, and you can say, well, what if? And start asking questions on that. And so the third one was, for example, what happens if they don't come to you? Well, what is a cleaning service that doesn't come to you? Well, what else has to go into cleaning? Well, I have to buy cleaning supplies. I have to, whether that's cleaning products or tools that we use to clean. And maybe those are things that I'm not using all the time. Maybe I can rent them, or maybe it's a subscription service based on certain cleaning products, based on what I have in my home. Like these customized personal care services are extremely popular these days. So it's possible that maybe, just maybe, that something like that with cleaning products might be useful as well. So you just create ideas based on those, and with any of these techniques, you're going for quantity. You're just going for a huge number of ideas, not trying to spend a lot of time with any one idea yet.
Okay. Cool.
Another technique that I think is really great, particularly for existing businesses. So if your business is maybe growing a little stale, or you're looking to how to grow and you're looking for interesting marketing or sales opportunities, is the and what game. So you have some core thing that you offer, and then you just say that and what, and you create a big list of things. So an example of that might be like, let's say you're a winery, or you're a distributor of wines, and wine is your thing. We could easily come up with a very long list of wine ands. Wine and podcasting. Wine and food would be an obvious one. Wine and movies might be an interesting one. And so you just create these list of ands, and then from each of those ands, you quickly create a whole series of ideas based on those. For wine and movies.
Holy smoke. Wine and movies would be so fun up in the Mosley Event Center.
Yes.
Can you imagine that? Showing classic, great movies or cult following movies, and that's amazing.
And perfectly paired to a wine that they have, right? Wines evoke in us emotion. Right. And so you just match that to the movie. Or maybe it's a subscription service that looks at your Netflix queue and finds a brilliant bottle of wine to pair with a movie in your queue, or something along those lines. So you just come up with these whole set of ideas.
Yeah. I want to do that. They used to run, it's the, cocktails and canvases, right? Pairing painting with wine, or that pairing is now done all over the place. Been very, very successful, but who knew that people wanted to, well, it's obvious, right? Once you've done it.
Exactly. So we just in real time there created two based on wine and movies. And I bet we sat with it for 90 more seconds, we could come up with many, many, many more.
I've already bought the domain name.
And that's the benefit of the and what technique.
Cool.
And there are lots of other techniques that you can use as well. And all you're going for in this case is quantity. You're going for a large number of ideas. And there are a lot of techniques. In fact, Startup Reading will be publishing a little white paper on ideation techniques in preparation for the pub night, so everybody can have that in front of them, and they can pull through these ideas while they're going through the exercise. And of course, it just serves as a general thing. So maybe we can put the URL in the show notes once we get that far.
Okay. Yep.
So we'll go over a lot more ideas in that. But again, it's quantity over quantity at that point. And the
quantity over quality.
Did I say the same word twice?
I think you did.
Brilliant. Quantity over quality would be the obvious phrase there. So quantity.
And this is actually one of the huge stumbling blocks that when I sit around with people doing brainstorming, they're so trying to get the right idea. They want a good idea. They want it to be impressive and all that kind of stuff. And it's very vulnerable to actually get a bunch of bad ideas out, and even to start to activate on an idea that you're not holding tightly and let it change and morph. And I always think that the goal of ideation is to have something like, not to get a good idea, but be willing to do the work to make a bad idea good. And it turns out that work has to be done very publicly because of validation, right? You don't get to sit in a little special room, have everybody sign NDAs, never let it out of the black box until it's beautiful. It's like, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And that's one of the reasons I'd like to start with that bad idea exercise, is that you can kind of establish a little bit of a safe space to do that work, right? To share those ideas that maybe you're not super, super happy with, and that honestly maybe just came at the top of your head right there. I'm just going to throw this thing out there. And it takes a little bit of trust in the group to do that. The reason that there are a few reasons, but the reason you want quantity over quality, there's the obvious reason. The obvious reason is that the more ideas you have, the more likely you are to stumble upon one. That's good. That's great. But another reason that maybe isn't so obvious is that when you have a huge quantity of ideas, it actually lessens the pressure that you put on each idea. So if we were to sit at a table and there were 5 of us there and we were to say, okay, let's go around the table and everybody give their idea. There's a huge amount of pressure in there. There are 5 ideas and it's competing against 5. You're competing against 4 other ideas. And so there's a lot of pressure on that idea to be good. Instead of doing that, if we all collectively came up with 40 or 50 different ideas, then the pressure on each individual idea is extremely small.
That's interesting because when I'm doing facilitating group conversations around consulting and that sort of thing, one of the things that we do is it's the same idea. We put as many things on the board as you can. And one of the benefits is you start to see patterns. You start to see categories form. And everybody has said something a little differently, but it's like, okay, it's over here somewhere. That, right? But then everybody's had a voice in creating that. And you're not having to compete with, oh, somebody had the right answer. It was that person again, that whole thing. It's right. Everybody's voice is on the board. And when you start to categorize and prioritize these, people have a tendency to be able to see themselves in it, and it creates a much better brainstorming environment.
Absolutely.
I hear you saying a lot about kind of opening up possibilities, right? Just opening up as many things as you possibly can. Is there a point at which you turn the corner and start to do the reductive work, or is that part of the ideation process, or is it all about just as many as possible?
There is definitely a point in ideation where you have to get to something more specific where the work wasn't actionable at all. And ideation can be a long process. And if it's done really well, it should be a process that you take a little bit of time with. But but the actual process of getting a huge quantity of ideas takes far less time than you'd think. If you have an existing space in which you're working, like I have an existing business, I sell wine, right? Or Mindbox sells software. Or if you're trying to start a startup where you're looking at a particular problem that you want to solve, you can probably spend an afternoon on ideation and walk away with a few things that you want to explore in more detail. So how do you get from that big set of, here's my huge quantity of these many, many, many ideas, most of which are terrible, to a few that maybe are less terrible or are at least interesting? And the way to do that at some point is you do turn that corner. When momentum starts slowing a little bit on quantity or just for purposes of time, you kind of turn the corner a little bit and you say, okay, we're going to flip a switch now. And now we're going to move into quality, over quantity. We're going to take this as a funnel. We started with a huge amount of ideas and we're going to filter down to a few that are more interesting to explore. And there are a couple ways to do that, but I think the easiest way to talk about doing that is sitting with an idea until it becomes a blocker. So you take this one idea and you start talking about it as a group, and as soon as nobody has anything else to say, or if you come up with something that you can't come up with a solution for right then, doesn't mean you won't later, but because if you can't right then set it aside. You're done with it because it's about momentum. It's about moving forward and forward and forward with the process. And so then you move on to the next one. You do the same thing until you're blocked on that one and you set it aside. And naturally in that process, like you said earlier, Kirk, that you're going to start seeing patterns around ideas. And you're also going to see the momentum in the room, right? There's going to be a feeling around certain ideas where the group is obviously excited about something or obviously not excited about other things, which, by the way, is equally interesting. And,
right.
And so you just take those ideas, and those are the ones that move forward, the ones that have the most momentum around, the ones that have the most interesting conversations surrounding them, the ones that maybe didn't get blocked quite so fast as the other ones.
Cool. So ideation is, if you were to sum it up in a brief statement, what is ideation? Why is it hard? What do you do about it? And how do you have a good idea?
So ideation is hard because we're trying to solve something that probably someone else hasn't solved very well. So inherently breaking new ground. The process that we use to try to do that is a creative process that starts with quantity and then moves into quality to have a few ideas that we can explore. Those ideas are probably solutions to some type of existing problem. And how do you know if an idea is good? Well, all ideas are bad. It's what you do with them that matter. Well, like, it's the thing. So I know I've said this a lot of times in like the startup world, but most people think that ideas are inherently valuable. And in fact, ideas are inherently not valuable. And what's valuable are teams, and what's valuable are the team's execution. It's what you do with those ideas. The first thing you do with those ideas, like we've talked about, is get out of the building and test them. So what makes a good idea? It's the one that survives that process. It's the one that you get out of the building, you find, oh my goodness, all these people, they all have this problem. There's so many people having this problem. And when I told them my solution, not only did their eyes light up, but they started pulling out their wallets and said, where can I enter my credit card information? Because I need this thing freaking right now. Those are the good ideas. And it's only when you get to that point do you have something that is a good idea. Before that, all you have is an interesting idea, not even necessarily a good one.
That's amazing. So if you're listening to this podcast and you feel like you have to have a good idea before you can become an entrepreneur, come to Pub Talks. Josh will prove you wrong.
Yes, indeed.
If you're sitting in coffee shops or co-working spaces or your office, continually talking about your ideas, but not activating on them, we want you to know that we have no idea if your idea is good. We don't even know if it's interesting. Come to Pub Talks and you'll find out how to find out if it is. And if you're a person that has already launched a bunch of stuff and has had good ideas, we still want you to come to Pub Talks and tell us about your experience and what did you learn and how did you do that? Because we think you have more ideas that need to be activated. And the ecosystem certainly needs more of that. Basically, everybody come to Pub Talks.
That would be how I would sum it up.
That's awesome, Josh. I'm wondering if you can end with a story from your own experience, either personally trying to get something off the ground, or maybe one of the clients that you've worked with that you can share their story of what have you experienced in terms of actual feet on the ground realities around this idea?
I can share a personal story about a startup that I was working on last year. And our basic idea when we started this thing was to solve this problem that a lot of people have, at least from our research and from our own personal experience of trying to decide where you're going to eat with a group of friends, right? It's kind of this intractable thing that you kind of, I don't know, where do you want to go? I don't know. And then, some people say they don't care, but they really do care. They just don't want to say they don't care. And there's all these psychological problems that go along with that. So we want to solve this problem. And so we came up with what is, of course, a brilliant idea to solve this. We said, we're going to create a chat bot because that's the future, right? We're texting our friends. Why not just text this chat bot? And then the chat bot, like a butler, will coordinate with all of our friends. And then, it'll decide based on what it knows about all of us, this one place that would be perfect for everyone to go. And that's amazing. And that was this great idea. And we started talking to people. The problem resonated with everyone in our demo virtually. It was a very, very, very popular idea. But we learned something interesting though. We learned that the chatbot thing, the solution that we were picking to the problem, really didn't align with really anybody. That chatbots, there's this trend in technology toward these conversational interfaces. Think your Google Homes and your Amazon Echoes and your Siris and Google Now if you're on your mobile phone. There's this trend of these conversational UIs. And so most people, and I mean that in the most literal sense, most people use Facebook Messenger. But, and Facebook Messenger has this little thing at the top that you can use to search their whole catalog of bots that people have registered on the platform. So you can go and talk to bots right now in Facebook Messenger. It's not a new feature. But what we found was that even though it's right there on an app that most people use, at least on occasion, and it's right there in the app, that they didn't even know it was there. That this technology was just under the surface the whole time. And so our solution didn't resonate there. So our idea of how we wanted to solve that wasn't a good one. It wasn't a good idea in the end. And the lesson there, though, was that, again, the problem that we were trying to solve really did resonate with a lot of people. That solution didn't. And that's one of the most important lessons, I think, that an entrepreneur or a product manager can learn, which is that if you latch onto a solution, if I just said, I want to create this chatbot where I'm going to go out there and people can talk to this thing and learn where they want to eat. And then I go out and talk to people and I find out they don't want the chatbot. I'm done. Right? That's it. I'm finished with there goes my story. Yeah. But if you latch onto a problem, and the problem is helping a group of friends decide where to eat, then you can pivot a little bit. So we pivoted off of that idea. We pivoted off the chatbot idea. There were other reasons as well, but we pivoted off that idea and instead decided to go with an app. And that idea resonated much, much, much more heavily with people out there. So if you have a good idea at the start, do it surrounding a problem, validate the problem, come up with solutions. And we did ideation techniques like this to try to figure out what the solution was, and then validate that, and then pivot if you're not hitting it. Pivot until you see the eyes light up and people going, I want that now. Tell me when you have this thing up because I want it right now.
Yeah. Fabulous. Fabulous. Thanks, Josh. See you on the 21st.
All right. I'll see you guys there. 21st, 5:30 at Maxwell's.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Startup Reading Podcast. If you'd like to know more about what's going on inside the ecosystem, you can check us out at startupreading.com or follow us on Facebook. And always remember, today is a great day to get started.